This took place sometime in the winter of 2020. It was sometime in January, and it was shortly sometime before the global pandemic began, which happened to be around March when everything went into lockdown. Now, at the time of this story, it was when I was very new to an area that I moved up north from a city that had been gone really crazily expensive to live in. There was this really nice trails that my mom and I took our dogs for, or at least our dog for a walk, and he obviously loved it. One of the winter times, though, was something that was honestly questionable. While we were taking our dog across what seemed to be some sort of field that was covered in snow, we ended up taking a forest trail that would lead us somewhere, which we'd have no idea where it would lead us to. We took my dog and we let him run around and do his own thing, as there were some people that would basically walk their dog and hike there, but we had to make sure that there was nothing coming towards us. As we were doing that, my mom and I were walking around, enjoying the beautiful view, when all of a sudden I heard a tree branch snap. My dog ended up staring at what seemed to be something that was in the right side. He didn't move or anything, but he kind of had his ears forward, like if he was alerted. I headed over there and I asked him if my dog was okay, and he seemed to sense something was not right. I honestly thought that maybe he could have seen a wild animal, as that has happened before, and I looked, but I couldn't see anybody. There was nobody in the trail, but there were some cars there, but they could have been maybe someone else walking around the area. My dog continued to stare at whatever was going on, and I looked, but I couldn't really see anything. I don't know if my dog saw something that was really unnatural or whatever, but it was really weird. I ended up looking over and I saw that there was something black. It looked like something that was about 6 feet tall and had really black fur. It was hunched over, so I couldn't really see it, but it was sitting about a couple feet away, like at least 30 feet. Of course, there were some branches that had no leaves were covering the view, so I couldn't really exactly tell what it was. I grabbed a hold of my dog's leash, thinking that it could have been a bear wandering around, but it didn't look like a bear. I couldn't even see what it was doing. At this point, it stood up and it was about over 6 feet tall, and this honestly really scared me, and my dog was about growling lightly, like if he was going to bark. Whatever it was, and took off running into the woods, and honestly, I told my mom about it when it was out of sight. She had no idea what it was, but she was sensed far behind. She kind of sensed something was up when I was staring at whatever it was for a while. We honestly headed back to our car and drove back down, but didn't go out on the trail for at least a while. We are not really sure as to what this thing was, but we know it wasn't a bear, a coyote, or any mountain lion or any creature natural to the area. But it was something that we honestly don't know what it was. I still question myself to this day on what it was, but unfortunately, that answer is going to be still left with questions for a while. This comes to shows that we don't really know what's really out there until we see it for ourselves or do more research on them. Nothing like this has ever happened since then, but I still am now being more aware of my surroundings. Now, this actually happened to a friend of mine who used to go to his school back in 2012. She was only about maybe 17 years old, and this happened sometime before her graduation. This was about winter of 2012, and it was sometime around before Christmas. Must have been a week or two before Christmas, and at the time of the story, we'll call her by the name Alex. Alex was 17 and was a really beautiful, nice girl. She'd always help everybody out whenever she can, and she was very smart. However, she used to walk home from school almost every day, except for days when it was really bad on the weather or whatever. However, one of these days she had to stay back at school after buses. One of them being she decided to stay back for a little bit to catch up on some homework before the holidays. The teachers were fine with that as she was very nice at the school, but of course when the teachers started leaving, that's when she had to leave as well. But of course this was one of the days where she was staying behind to finish up on some homework. As she was doing some homework on her computer during the library, she then noticed outside when the teacher said it's starting to get a little bit darker and that they were closing the school. Now, Alex knew she had to get ready as it happened to be on a Friday, which meant she didn't have to go to school the next day. She ended up deciding to go grab her stuff and ended up leaving the school. Once she packed up and started doing her own thing, and when packing up, she ended up thanking the teachers for letting her stay in the school for a little while. After she said that, she decided to start walking home, but decided she would go to her friend's house to show her the project on her flash drive. Of course, she let her mom and dad know she would be walking home and she'd be a little later as she had to see her friend about this upcoming project. Her parents said that if she needed a ride, she could let them know. So Alex started walking home from the school, and only about 5 minutes away from her friend's house was where the school and her friend's house were about 5 minutes apart, traveling walking-wise. When Alex got to her friend's house, she gave her the project of what happened in the project that she did and how far she got. This got on Alex's friend to take everything from the flash drive into her computer so she could get it all ready for the weekend, since the two of them were partners for this type of project. I can't remember if it was a chemistry project or not, but it has been a while, so I will say it was probably for a science project or some school-related project. Now, this was when things got really messed up, but of course that was just that. When Alex got ready, she decided to stay at her friend's house for dinner as her mother was cooking, so she had no problem with that. Once she got cooking on dinner and getting it ready, she ended up staying at a friend's house for a while. However, her friend was concerned about something going on, so that was to be expected, as Alex needed to get home as soon as possible. Honestly, her parents couldn't figure that out either, and they thought something must have happened. But that might have been a mystery, as she couldn't really tell. However, this is when things got really strange and utterly messed up, but that was when something was about to go down. Alex said that she had to get home, and it was about maybe 6 o'clock at night. All the lights of the houses were lit up, most of them being Christmas lights, although some of them happened to be outdoor lights or Christmas lights. Alex was basically walking through the snowy ground when all of a sudden she looked up to see that there was someone or something walking from behind her. She turned to think that maybe it was probably a neighbor of hers that happened to know the area or something. But when she turned back, she didn't see anybody, and this was getting her really strange. Something in her mind said that something was not right, and she didn't know if she was being followed. She ended up looking over to see if there was someone around, but of course there was just only that figure who stood about maybe 15 feet away. He seemed to have what seemed to be wearing a black hoodie and baggy pants, resembling jeans or something. From the looks of it, Alex thought that maybe it was just a random person walking home from whatever this person needed to be. Alex headed home because she was getting paranoid that this thing might be following her. However, when she picked up the pace, the figure did too, and then she started sprinting all the way home. However, though, she ended up having to take the long way home, hoping that the figure would not follow her. But of course, she arrived back at home and around 7 o'clock, and her parents were concerned as to why she was running. She eventually told them that she was being followed by something, and that's when her parents got concerned, thinking that someone might have been stalking her or something, but Alex said that it wasn't anyone she recognized. Of course, that's when Alex's parents decided that they would call the cops. When they called the cops, they made a report on the thing, but they couldn't really identify who the man was. But the police said that they would patrol the area for the next week or so before Christmas, just to make sure that if this figure was really following her, they would be caught. Now, Alex was not allowed to walk home from school for the next few months, until sometime in the new year when she got a report. After New Year's Day and she had a fun partying, she got a call from the police station when she was home alone. It was obviously the police saying that they actually caught the person who was stalking her that one night. Apparently, whoever it was honestly some sort of serial killer in the area and was trying to hunt down her for some reason. Why did they target her was something that she had no idea. But it was honestly something that they had no idea who this person was. He was arrested though, but Alex was now told not to walk home alone at night unless she was with a friend or a group of friends. This had never happened to her since then, since they moved out of the area. But Alex does get, kind of paranoid when she's walking by herself. It was honestly something that she never wanted to ever go through again, even if it meant that her life was at the risk. So I don't really exactly remember this story, but this happened time in 2016 in the winter. Now, I was at Pony Club one day, and as I was waiting for my mom to come and pick me up from the barn, I went over to the pasture to see a few horses that were there. Two of them were being in the pasture that were being brought in by other people, so I was just watching them. However, I looked to my left, and I saw that there was this one horse that I have never seen before. Now, this horse was definitely not someone that I have recognized, and it was definitely someone that I'd never recognized at the barn or anywhere. This horse literally had what seemed to have this huge star with a stripe all the way down to where it's close to its snout. I honestly was kind of a little confused, but its eyes were white, and it obviously looked at me. It was from the other side of the pasture, and I couldn't really get a good look as to what it was. I honestly didn't know what this horse was doing or if it was any of our horses. It honestly didn't resemble anyone I've recognized, so I just ignored it, thinking that maybe it was just something going on with this horse or could be my imagination. However, it wasn't until then I looked back up again and I saw whatever it was, the horse was gone. When I looked over, I stepped back a few steps to see that this horse was charging at me. I honestly ran to the barn and I ended up telling the barn owner about it, but when they looked over the pasture, they didn't find the horse there. Honestly, all the horses were in the barn, and when I explained to them the best I can of my ability of what this horse looked like, they said they never had a horse that was like that. Honestly, I don't know if my mind was playing tricks on me that day, but what I have a feeling that what I experienced that day was completely paranormal. About maybe a couple years ago, this actually happened to someone who happened to be living in Maine at the time. It happened to be a close friend of my family's, which I can't remember who met this person, but her name was Jane. Jane was living in a pretty nice big house with her husband named Jonathan, and they had been living there for about 2 years. The house they lived in was pretty nice, and they get snow a lot in Maine, to which they obviously love the Christmas season. They love getting everything ready. So this was sometime around after their Thanksgiving when they started putting up all the Christmas stuff up. As they were getting ready, however, one of the nights was honestly terrifying in the most. Jane was home alone one night as her husband, Jonathan, was out at a work company event. I can't really remember clearly what it was about, but Jane was home alone in her house. As she was home alone in her house, she was basically getting stuff ready for Christmas, and all of a sudden she hears what seemed to be her phone going off. Now, it was her house phone, and they normally don't answer that as they're either scam calls, telemarketers, or people looking for her or her husband. She headed over towards the house phone and picked it up. And when she picked up the phone, she honestly heard what seemed to be nothing when she said hello a few times. Thinking it could have been maybe some prank callers, she ended up hanging up on them and just continued to decorate. Not less than 5 minutes later, her house phone rang again, and this time she picked it up. Hello? Jonathan? Is that you? Jane asked on the phone, but there was no answer. This honestly got Jane annoyed. Just as she was about to turn her phone off of the house phone, she heard what seemed to be a loud screech. It honestly sounded really demonic. She honestly had no idea who was calling her, but she ended up deciding to think that maybe she could trace the phone number, so she went online to see if she could trace it. Unfortunately, she was not able to trace the phone number as it didn't lead them to anywhere where it could be hiding. Honestly, still frustrated as hell, she ended up calling Jonathan and explained about the whole ordeal. Jonathan told her to just block the number if he calls again, to which Jane had no hesitation in doing that. However, though, that number never called again for the rest of the night, and Jane was left with peace. Fast forward to around 2 o'clock in the morning. Jonathan and her were sleeping in their bed when all of a sudden Jane woke up to what appeared to be tapping on the door. She ended up going over to look, and she looked at her phone security camera and she can see that there was someone banging on her front door. Honestly, the camera was facing towards where the door was, so this man was honestly looked like he was in his 30s. He suddenly looked up at Jane and noticed that he might have been being watched, and then took off running down the street as far as he could into the night. The next day, Jane went over to the police and made a report on this suspicious person trying to break in and entering in her house. They couldn't find this person, and to Jane's knowledge as well as Jonathan's, they're not sure if he was ever caught or not. She would like to think that this person was caught, but that was a chance that she couldn't really know for a fact if that was the case. Still to this day, Jane still wonders today about why this man was the one at the door. Could he be the one behind the phone calls? That was honestly a question Jane wanted to know. But the chance of that being the case were very slim, as she has never met this person before, and this person never came back to her house again. Just to let you guys know, this is actually a 911 call that happened to be maybe a few years ago. I can't honestly remember, but it took place in the winter. So, viewer discretion is advised, as this story may be a little bit upsetting for some people. This 911 call had happened to be somewhere in the northern parts of the USA back in 2016. Unfortunately, I don't know if it was in Oregon or Montana, but it was somewhere in the northern part of the United States. A 911 call was issued around sometime late at night, around maybe 9 p.m. when in the dark and during a really bad snowstorm. When the 911 operator picked up, this person who happened to call said that she was in a car accident and The snow was blowing hard and she couldn't get out of her car. Now, at the time of this story, her accident was pretty bad as the front of her car was totaled as she was on the highway, went off road to a snowbank that happened to be on the side. Now, the 911 operator told her about just to stay calm and to honk a horn if there's a tow truck or at least something passing by. She happens to do that, but she said that she was driving her 2 kids and her husband been home from a party, and it happened to be a drunk driver hit them and totaled their car. The police and the ambulance arrived and they arrested the drunk driver, but of course the kids did live, and same with the mom, but however the mom had a few minor injuries, but of course the husband unfortunately didn't make it as he was hit on the passenger side by the drunk driver. The kids are fine with minor issues though, but the husband unfortunately passed upon arrival at the ambulance. This was one 911 call that this operator that used to take them honestly feels very sorry for this woman for having to lose her husband in such a tragic car accident. Now, I can't really remember exactly when this happened, but I believe it was sometime in 2017. One of my closest friends, which we'll call him by Matthew, happened to be around in his mid late 30s at the time of the story. He and his wife, and they had at least 3 kids of their own, were going Christmas shopping in a really bad snowstorm. It didn't happen to be in the snowstorm in the beginning of it, but it happened while they were Christmas shopping. Now, Matthew, along with his wife and 3 kids, were all going towards the car when they looked to see that there happened to be a man, say him in his 50s. He seemed to be giving them a deranged grin. This honestly got Matthew to get his family inside the car, and he got in and drove off. He thought that was the end of it, but however, though in the winter, many strange things happen. It wasn't until a few months later, when it happened to be around February, when the winter storm was going on again. That's when Matthew ended up realizing that this man had been stalking his family everywhere he went. This figure had been standing a few feet away from wherever they were, and he had no idea onto what this man was trying to do. Matthew made a report to the police, and they arrested the man. At least 2 days afterwards, they found him. Apparently, he had been stalking families for about a couple years, and he had known to kidnap children and as well as murder their parents. It was honestly messed up. But at the time of the story, Matthew honestly was glad he did the right thing, was to get this guy out. Happened to be a blizzard almost every time when this man would stalk them. But of course, one day, Matthew came out of his car about maybe 2021 after a snowstorm had hit. Of course, it was still going on. He got out to go to the mall when he looked to see that there was a mugshot of the person. This mugshot honestly resembled the same man that had been stalking them during the winter months a few years back. It honestly really frightened him, knowing that whoever it was really stalking them, especially during the summer times. He was not around, or in the springtime, but in the wintertime was when this stalker guy was around. Now, as Matthew tells me this story, well, not this me personally, but tells to some people this story that I have heard, he has never heard of this man again, and I honestly am glad that this man would either be in prison or something much worse. I can't really confirm on where he is now as of today.